Hi, my name's Rob Norman. I'm proud to say I'm a director of Knotch. I'm the former Chief Digital Officer of GroupM at WPP. I'm thrilled to welcome my friend, Frank Cooper, to Pros and Content today. Frank is a managing director and the Chief Marketing Officer of BlackRock, perhaps the largest investment manager in the world. Welcome, Frank. Welcome to Pros and Content. And give us the elevator speech on BlackRock, just so everyone can get themselves set.
Okay. Rob, great to see you as always. Really happy to be here. It's a great event, and I'm excited to play a role in it. Look, so BlackRock is the largest investment management company in the world. We have about $6.5 trillion of assets under management, and we serve clients as a fiduciary. So we represent only clients across the full spectrum of investments. And so whether it is private equity or infrastructure and real estate or index and exchange traded funds or stocks and bonds, we serve that full range. And we also have a technology platform called Aladdin, which we white label for a bunch of different companies across the globe.
Okay, so we're at a pretty interesting time right now, and what brands and businesses say and how they say it seems to have been under the microscope more than any time in the careers you and I have had. Can you do two things? Can you give us a broad scorecard for how you think the CMO community is responding to the circumstances, and then maybe talk a little bit more about how they should think about that response over the coming months and years?
Sure. Look, actually, I've been really inspired by a lot of what I've seen from companies and brands and CMOs from this initial stage, acknowledging the challenges that we're facing, from climate change to the social challenges we see today, advocating on behalf of it. I've seen more courage in CEOs and CMOs and stepping out and taking a position. And some of the early commitments are all encouraging signs. But I think that's just it. It's the first phase. And it can go away very quickly, number one. Number two, it's not really about the money. It is about the money, but the money alone won't save any one of these brands or any one of these companies. And the numbers keep getting bigger, and I'm happy to see the investment, but it's deeper than that. And I think the first recognition from a marketer's perspective is to recognize that the brand apocalypse is here. And I'm using apocalypse in the Greek way, which is to reveal. It's not the end of something. It's to reveal something that's always existed. And a lot of what we're seeing now, I'm hearing a lot of people say like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. It seems like it came out of nowhere. Actually, it's been around for quite some time. The undercurrents have been there. The tectonic plates have been shifting. It's all been happening, but now it's revealed. Racism in America is not new. Racism globally is not new. The need for police reform is not new. The idea of climate change is not new, but it's all getting revealed. And so I think recognizing that and facing that is critical. And to get there, to me, I think we have to raise the consciousness of the C-suite and the board of directors. And so in raising the consciousness, Rob, I think it is getting them to understand that there are changing expectations among a wide group of stakeholders, which will inform or threaten a company's social license to operate. I think and so that to me is going to be the most critical shift that we have to face.
So let's stay on that line. And you said this to me before, the idea of the social license to operate. How do you think about that, specifically in your business at BlackRock, where you have to balance this enormous scale and maybe the perception of too much power with some people, but with this enormous ability to be an invoker of change? How do you manage the way that bubbles up from the world around us? And then how do you, as the CMO, because I guess that's what your job is here, is act as the bridge to the C-suite? Because my guess is that there are some things that you're talking about that may even come into conflict with the shortest term profitability agenda of the firm.
Yeah. I mean, two great questions. So look, on the first one, this question of scale, we've gone through a period of time where bigness or scale equals bad, right? We've gone through that period of time, and that you can see that kind of parallel the declining trust in institutions overall. which has been going on for the past 40 years, roughly. But if you strip it back, you see that scale in and of itself is not perceived as bad. It's when scale is combined with either bad actions or scale is combined with mystery. When people are like, I have no idea what this company does. I have no idea how they operate, but I know they're massive. And you become the Hulk as opposed to Superman. You become the X-Men. Like I said, we don't know what with these superpowers and what intentions lie beneath it. And so for me, in order to, you can't hide scale and become the elephant in the corner and hope that no one sees you. The question, the only thing you can really do is demonstrate that your intentions are consistent with making the world better, making people's lives better, and helping ordinary people. And if you can do that, scale suddenly becomes a virtue. And so part of this whole purpose movement, and the reason I love it and embrace it wholeheartedly, and think every CEO should, from every company, but particularly large companies, is that the only way forward that I can see where you're going to unify this wide range of stakeholders, from employees to customers to communities to taxpayers, the planet, is to have an organizing principle that unifies them, and that's purpose. And so to me, that's the first part on the scale side of it. The second question you ask is, how do you translate this to the C-suite? Which, well, I mean, you know this well, because you talk to a lot of, and I'd love to hear your point of view on it. You talk to a lot of C-suite executives across various industries, and the translation part is the toughest part. But underneath that translation part, I think there are two things that are happening. One is the constant kind of short-term mindset of the investment community. And so you'll have a group of people who will say, rightly so, that, hey, all this is great, and it's probably true long-term, but how do I survive as a CEO? How do I win as a CEO next quarter and the next quarter? And if you want me to take my eye off of that, I feel like I could be threatened. So there's this short-term pressure, I think, that most CEOs face, and I think the translation has to be, you have to do both. You have to.
I think so too. I think what's intriguing about now, and this is maybe a bit of a manufactured alliteration on my part, but I couldn't resist it, is that we have pandemic, we have panic in a lot of people's minds in financial markets and their assets, and now we have pandemonium in the form of protests and other things to go with it. When you're creating content and building the narrative of the firm, whether it's your narrative internally or your narrative to the pension funds whose money you invest, or indeed to their end users, teachers, and whoever's fund it might be, and to retail investors, how do you push your communication through the filter of a public health emergency, great uncertainty in the market, and social unrest at the same time? Or do you have to just do the right thing and stay the course and not sort of course correct for everything that happens?
Yeah, I mean, look, it depends on the brand, right? And so for me, the corporate brand, which is the umbrella brand for our entire firm, it has to demonstrate, it has to perform our purpose consistently over time. And so to me, the hook to all of it is our purpose. And I don't think it's about transforming the brand depending on the stakeholder. I'm now in front of the community, let's dance a different way. And I'm now in front of employees, let's speak a different way. I'm now in front of the customer, let's give them a different perspective. The corporate brand, I think, has to have as its center of gravity this core notion of, here's why we exist in the world. Here's how we make the world a better place. Here's our contribution to society. You have to have that at the core. Otherwise, you'll start to dance, and guess what? That dance is going to get exposed very quickly because the lines are completely blurred now on social media. Those stakeholders that I just mentioned, they're citizens, they're NGOs, but they're all sitting in the same places. They're sitting across social media, and in those environments, those lines no longer exist between them. And so to me, that's a major shift. Is the corporate brand has to stand firmly on its purpose. And then we have an investment brand, also called BlackRock, which is speaking more to clients.
But they also, all of those stakeholders, have different levels of understanding of the mechanics of the markets, of what the inputs are into those markets, about what things like ethical investing means on the one hand, and ETFs and terminology mean on another hand. And so you have to keep communicating to those people at a level that's relevant and valuable to them. And can you therefore separate that kind of, if you like, functional communication and just sort of put an overall tone on it that keeps going on? Do you have to think about those big things that are going on at each part of the functional communication?
Yeah, I think that's right, Rob. That you have to separate those. But the way, at least I think about it, is that at the broadest level, there should be a communication that is true about the brand, that's true about the company, that everyone can understand. And it's not dumbing it down so that it actually is a simplistic statement. It is actually just stating it in lay terms so that everyone can understand it. But to your point, you have to give each stakeholder the opportunity to go deeper. And so once you get past that statement, investors want to know, is sustainable investing profitable or not? Is it going to deliver returns for me or not? We believe that it does. Communities want to know deeper. So what are you actually doing in our community? Are you investing in local organizations and national organizations? So I think you're right. There's a kind of a common statement, common communication, lay terms that everyone can understand, and then opportunities for different stakeholders to go deeper.
I wanted to kind of look back and look forward at the same time, Frank. Now, you weren't at BlackRock in 2008, 2009. I think you were at Pepsi then.
That's right.
I'm guessing. I guess a kind of financial calamity whilst you're working at Pepsi feels different to one that you're working when you're working at BlackRock. And Frank, for those of you that don't know, went from Pepsi to BuzzFeed and then to BlackRock. So you can't accuse the man of a lack of variety in his career choices. But I, unlike you, did work with BlackRock during the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. And a lot of the internal narrative then was about BlackRock's role in creating liquidity for markets overall in a time when credit was squeezed, and the ability through Aladdin and everybody able to operate on this platform to BlackRock to ungum the gears of the global economy. Now, as they say repeatedly, this time it's different, but you had a very specific story that you could tell about the value of your scale and technology and your role in the extended community of financial services organizations than the one you have now, I think, which is, I think you still have that. And I just wondered if there's a different anchor that you've looked for that talks about why we're especially valuable now, or is that not the time to do that?
I think it's always the time to do it, whether you're in a crisis or whether you're in times of tranquility. And again, I'm going to repeat this because I just think it's critical for us. We always go back to our purpose. And if I were to articulate our purpose, is to help more and more people experience financial well-being. And financial well-being sounds like this very generic term, but we operate on 3 levels of financial well-being. I think we're the only ones who can do this. On the individual level, everyone gets that. People want to move from financial stability to economic mobility to financial security to freedom, right? And we can help along that. But there are communities and groups that also want financial well-being, and that's more of what you see in real estate and infrastructure. The one thing we can do, though, is a third tier, is that we can actually help to shift the system and structures in a way that benefit more people. So if BlackRock says we're going to make ETFs mainstream so that more people can come in and enjoy the benefits of investing through ETFs, that's a statement. If we're going to say we're going to make sustainability our standard, the impact of our scale allows us to shift the industry and multiple industries actually toward what we think is allowing more people to experience financial well-being. So to me, the narrative is much more around, it's less around the very specific technical application, right? That we're increasing liquidity or we're providing credit to the middle markets, or it's more about, so how does this help ordinary people? Yeah, and that to me is the narrative that people are yearning for right now. We understand what you're doing in general, but how does this help ordinary people?
So just lastly, Frank, you're the chief marketing officer and a managing director at BlackRock. There are big voices and big personalities within the firm. And Larry Fink, the co-founder and CEO, is a kind of a titan on the stage, and probably along with Jamie Dimon and Warren Buffett, the three people in the financial markets that I just listen to. How do you think about those people like Mr. Fink and things like your giant scale fund managers as voices that help tell the message for the business overall? And how do you think about activating that?
You know, I was fortunate. So Larry has been writing his letter to CEOs for probably about 8 years now. And so every year in January, he writes a letter to CEOs, about 1,000 CEOs of the top 1,000 companies. And, you know, we're invested in more public companies than any other company in the world. And so it has an impact. But what surprised me, the reason I said I'm lucky, is Larry's courage. You know, Larry's been successful beyond words. And there's no reason for Larry to take on the things that he's taken on, but he's taken on the idea of long-termism. He's taken on the idea of diversity and inclusion before we hit this current moment. He's taken on the idea of purpose. He's taken on the idea of sustainability. And so for me, that letter has started off as a letter that had industry impact. It's now a cultural phenomenon. And Larry's become more of a cultural figure as a result of that. And that endures to the benefit of our brand, but also the reputation of the company. And so it's an important piece of how we communicate, for sure.
So it's an elegantly symmetrical situation. So the things for which BlackRock holds invested companies accountable are exactly the same thing in which kind of society should hold BlackRock accountable, because if you're going to put your finger on the scale of diversity and inclusion, then it should be reflected reciprocally.
100%, Rob. And look, and for me, it's a question of through what lens should a company evaluate what's critical. And for me, and this is part of my own background, is I start from the outside, from culture, from society, and then ask, how does that impact the industry? And then ask, how can BlackRock differentiate itself within it? And by starting with society and culture, those things that are bubbling up that look like surprises no longer are surprises. Give me an example. The wealth inequality conversation has been bubbling up for the past year, got really, really hot when COVID-19 hit. You could see it spike if you just looked at the data. And of course, it erupted when we saw, Amy Cooper and Christian Cooper encounter, and George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor. It erupted at that point, but it was brewing underneath the entire time. And so for me, starting from culture and working back to the industry and then coming to the company is to me, the process through which I actually try to arrive at what's an important statement for us to make.
Well, Frank, you've always given me hope and confidence. I think the firm can give us hope and confidence. Thanks for joining us. You're a friend and a company, and I hope our audience today appreciate your time. Thank you.
Definitely enjoy it. Thank you, Rob. And you give me hope and confidence because you keep me real. You always pull me.
Okay.
I appreciate it. All right, thank you.